Good afternoon. This is Tim Gleisner from the Library of Michigan. I'm head of collections. I'm here today with Michigan Notable Book Award winner of 2020, Susie Finkbeiner. Her book, All Manner of Things by Revell Press, was published in the last year and was selected by the Notable Book Committee. We would like to just allow anyone the chance, if they are so desiring, to contact the Library of Michigan Foundation for any support they would like to give in the future to the Library Michigan Notable Book Program in the Library of Michigan. And with that, I'd like to say, welcome, Susie Finkbeiner. How are you today?
Great. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, and thank you for being here on this lovely and hot day in the afternoon. So, you know, Susie, I begin these interviews with the same question. I would just like you to give us a little background and maybe leading us into how you became a writer. What got you to this point?
You know, I've always been obsessed with story. I come from a storytelling family. I come from a family that has several writers. And so it was very natural for me to kind of slip into this career as a writer. In fact, when people take reasonable jobs in my family, we're like, what? But I started writing at a very young age, and I just love it. And so when I became an adult, I would write plays for my church because we had no budget. And so I'd write the plays. And then a friend dared me to write a novel.
Wow.
And I said, that's what crazy people do. And it is a little bit maddening to write a novel, but I wrote my first novel and I was hooked, absolutely hooked.
So this wasn't your first novel, and I apologize for not knowing that. So what was your first novel about? What was, if I may ask.
My first novel, it released in 2013, and it's called Paint Chip. It's set in Michigan. I only have one novel that's not set in Michigan. Nice. And that one, it deals with sex trafficking and grief and loss. It's got a lot of issues in it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It was very timely at that time, because I mean, sex trafficking was definitely in the news at that time. I remember that for sure.
Yeah. At the time, I was working with some of the anti-trafficking organizations in Grand Rapids.
Okay. So tell me, why do you write? And I guess, you know, actually, just to go back to your background, so you're a native of Michigan. Where are you from in Michigan originally?
I was born and raised in Lansing.
Oh, really? Okay. Outside of Lansing. Okay, very good. What school did you go to?
Lansing Christian.
Lansing Christian. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And why do you write? Why do you feel compelled to write? What is it about writing that helps you, or what gets, you know, what is it that compels you to write?
Well, contract, that compels me. But also, it does. I really process the world. I process my emotions. I process life through story. And so it's cathartic in one way for me to write. And also I write because I know that when I read a book that I identify with, it reaches into my heart and really touches my emotions, I know how great of an experience that can be. And so if I can provide that in even a small way to a reader, that's gold to me. It's worth all of the 3 o'clock writing in the morning writing sessions and all the tearing out of the hair, all of it. It's worth all of it.
Okay, so catharsis. So you talk about 3 a.m. sessions. How often are you writing? Like, what is there a routine that you have, or just when the spirit grabs you? Like, how often do you think you write?
I write every day. Except the weekends. I try to take the weekends off.
Nice.
Just because you have to have that rest and break for your brain. I used to write every single day, and I realized I wasn't allowing myself to refresh with just having nothing on my mind, reading, spending time with my family, but 5 days a week, usually when the kids are at school, but they haven't been at school much lately.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So it's been a different schedule the past few weeks. And in fact, I was up until 3 o'clock in the morning last night because right as I headed to bed, I thought, oh, if I don't write this idea down, it's gone. I don't have the luxury of writing only when I'm inspired.
Sure.
But I think that if I sit down, if I make myself available, the inspiration does come eventually.
Okay. Can I ask, so are you always working on the same piece then due to your contracts, or, you have like 5 pieces that you're just kind of adding slowly? And I'm a novice, so I don't know. So please, I would like to know.
I only can do one project at a time. I really admire people who can do several,
Sure.
but I get so emotionally invested in the books that I'm writing that I think that would be very hard for me to switch and compartmentalize.
Sure.
That said, I dabble with poetry, but it's not good. It's not good. But sometimes it helps me get out of my head a little bit.
But that's all subjective, isn't it? Are you writing to a certain poetic form, or are you just free forming it? And again, I ask as a novice.
I just like to write poetry as it comes because I don't show it to anyone. There's no pressure, so I can write whatever, however. It's like playing for me.
Sure.
And I think that that's important for writers to still have, especially when we're professionals and we have to write to a deadline and there's a lot of pressure. We need to allow ourselves to play with the form too, so that we remember how much we love it and how enjoyable it can be.
So, and when my mind keeps going back to this contracts, and I've always heard things like, write 500 words a day. Do you have like a limit that you have to do every day? Like it's got to be 1,000 words, 2,000 words, something like that, or just as far as it'll take you.
I don't write to a word limit or a goal like that. My goal is more of, I would like to write this particular scene today, or this many chapters today. I think for me, the word count, I did do the word count goal for several years. I've done the Nanowrimo, which is the novel writing month.
Sure.
I've done that 3 times, I think. But when I do that, I write, so I just throw the words out on the page, and then it creates a lot of work in revision.
Okay.
Where, as how I write now, I'm writing and revising as I go, and then if I slow my pace down, it comes out a lot cleaner.
I just want to follow up on that. When you say you have a scene that you want to write, so do you have a book mapped out in your mind from the beginning, or and I apologize if I'm free forming my questions, but I'm really interested in that. Do you have it mapped out in your mind? Like, I know the story will go like this, or just how the story takes you organically along?
There's a little bit of both, actually.
Okay.
I know certain things that I have a list of, and I call it must happens. And so I write down a list. These are things that have to happen in order for, this has to happen so that this happens, so that this happens.
Sure.
And I don't plan exactly, to the minuscule detail what's going to happen. But like today, I woke up and I knew what would need to happen in what I wrote today. Sure. And so that's kind of how I did. I'm not one that outlines and plans everything. Although there are some people that swear by that. That's not worked for me in my process.
No, I'm not a planner at all, so I fully understand. So that's good. Let me ask you a question. So reading your book, there was a lot of research I felt that went into your book. What kind of research? Being a librarian, I'm interested in that for sure. What kind of research did you have to do for all manner of things?
The research was so much fun for that book. Well, not the war part. The war part was grueling. And I did utilize my library, Kent District Library, quite often.
Oh, nice. Okay.
To find some books about the Vietnam War. That part was really devastating to read, and I read more than I put into the book, of course. But so I read a lot of books. I don't even know how many books now I read. And I listened to all kinds of music from the era, made my kids listen to it. Now they're big 60s music fans.
Nice.
I watched a lot of television shows that they would have watched then. YouTube has so many resources.
Okay.
But the part that was really great is that there are a lot of people who grew up in that era who are willing to talk about it. And so I talked to my mom, about fashion and music and what it was like to be home while people she knew were over in Vietnam.
Right.
I talked to my dad a little bit, but then my dad wrote his memoir of his time serving in Vietnam.
Okay.
And that was fascinating. Just all of the things that I didn't know before about his life. So I wasn't just researching for the novel, I was researching family history. And so just having people that I could actually talk to in person was fantastic. And it gave so much more life to the novel than I could have given it having been born after that time.
Same here. Let me ask you a question. Setting, because I live in West Michigan. I've lived in West Michigan a long time. I know you're originally from Lansing, but being a resident and patron of Kent District Library, I definitely got a sense of place. And I the one thing I want to ask is I kept trying to guess which town it was. Now, I won't lie to you, the musical Fountain definitely gave it away, but I was kind of like, but that's not, it doesn't feel all Grand Haven to me. So
No.
Is it an amalgamation of towns?
Yes. A little bit of Ludington,
Okay.
mixed in with a little bit of Holland because of the Dutch stuff.
Yep.
And so just kind of like I took the lakeshore and kind of compressed it.
Nice.
I like to write my towns as fictional towns, just because I can do that. I can pick and choose different cultural and environmental aspects of Michigan, and just kind of push it together. When I was a kid, I was telling my husband, we never went to Grand Haven or Holland or anything because we just went right to Ludington because that's where I have family.
Okay.
And those memories of how wild it was a little bit more wild than it is now in the 80s.
Okay.
And just those memories are so distinct. And every time I go to Ludington, it takes me right back to how it was when I was a kid.
So you compressed West Michigan. How important is West Michigan? Obviously to this book, but is it a setting that you use in other books as well? Because I definitely got a very definitive sense of place, and that Dutch thing you talk about. I worked in Holland for a number of years, so I get that. But how important is the setting for you?
The setting is very important, particularly that book, because it informed so much of how the characters developed. For those who aren't familiar with the West Michigan Dutch culture, it is strong. Yeah. I had the privilege of sitting down with 3 generations of a family, a woman who immigrated from the Netherlands after World War II, and her children and one of her grandchildren, and just how strong their cultural identity is. And her children were born here, but they spoke Dutch until they went to kindergarten because there were so many people in their neighborhood who spoke Dutch that they just didn't know that they were supposed to learn English. Sure. And so that part was very important to get that right. And I'm not Dutch. but I've got a lot of friends who are, and they were very, very happy to tell me about the cookies their grandmas made, and the little phrases that their grandpas would say, and different things like that. And there's just something about West Michigan. There just is. It's beautiful, and just the community is strong and unified. I think we saw that a few weeks ago after the protests in Grand Rapids, how devastating it was to watch some of the violence after. There was a peaceful protest, and then there was the secondary event and the destruction. But then the next morning, seeing people from our community go and clean up and paint murals where the glass was broken, it's just, there's something about that I wanted to capture, and the focus on taking care of each other is really important, especially in this book.
You talk about the compression and the capturing the character. For some reason in your book, the one character who stands out in my mind, I have to ask you about characters, and I know we have a set of questions, and I'll get to them, I promise. But as I talk to you, it makes me think, the owner of the diner where the main character works, like, did you base this on real people, or do you compress different people into one character? For some reason, that diner owner just stuck with me of all the characters in your book. I don't know why. I mean, he wasn't a main character, but for some reason, he had some advice he gave to the girl eventually. But do you base it on just one singular person, or do you have a group of people that you just bring into in a composite? You know what I mean?
It depends on the character. So Bernie Jagger is Bernie's diner, and he is definitely a composite. So he is a little bit of a boss that I had when I was in college, was just kind of grumpy, and but so nice, but grumpy. His roughness was how he showed his love. And a little bit of my literature professor from college, and then a little bit of my friend Chris, who actually is a woman, but she's one of those no nonsense, loyal to the end type people. So Bernie is definitely a compression of several people, and I loved writing him. He was such a joy to write.
I will say that.
Joel Jacobson is actually a person.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
He's one of the music leaders at my church, and as I was writing the story, it was originally just Annie and Mike, the brother and sister, and then I thought, this family needs a teddy bear. And I looked across the room and I saw my friend Joel, and he's a teddy bear, and I thought, they need a Joel. And so I rewrote a lot of things to add that character in, and I'm so glad I did.
Nice. So let me ask you, which writers do you read to help you, or that inspire you? Like, who do you find yourself going to when you want to go read a book, and that you really look forward or look up to reading?
I think that the reason that I have grown as a writer is because I read a lot. So there are a lot of authors that I go to. John Steinbeck definitely formed a lot of how I see the world of literature. And I went through a period where I just wrote like John Steinbeck for a long time, and that's fine because it does help you build some chops. Oh goodness, I'm looking at my bookshelf trying to remember all the people. Lately, the Delia Owens, who wrote Where the Crawdads Sing.
Okay.
Wow, reading that book, it definitely fed my writer girl soul, and made me want to be a better writer. Oh goodness, there's so many. I think of this is such a hard question because you have to narrow it down. But I really admire Wendell Berry and Leif Enger is a big one for me. Goodness, so many. And recently I've been reading a lot of Colson Whitehead, and I can't write like that, but like the Underground Railroad, how it's just so out of the box, but it really gets my mind spinning in a different way. And so I think that going outside my genre really helps me to hone my own taste and my own skills.
Nice, nice. I read a lot of Steinbeck when I was younger. Amazing author. Do you feel you take anything from Steinbeck at all into your books?
Yes. I wrote a book about the Dust Bowl because of Steinbeck.
Really?
I did. Yeah, that is my one non-Michigan novel. When I was 17, I read The Grapes of Wrath, as you do, and from then on, I was completely obsessed with the Dust Bowl. Read everything I possibly could about it, and one day I looked at my husband and I said, "I think I'm going to write a Dust Bowl novel," and he said, "It's about time." So that the way that he describes things is just so rich. And the focus on people and how they relate to nature and how we treat each other and all of that, it's so strong, and it really did form who I am as a writer.
So let me ask, this book, All Manner of Things, how did you get the idea for this book?
You know, that's some of my books, I'm able to say, this moment I got the idea. I really don't know. I don't know with this one.
That's fair.
This one, it kind of formed organically. I wanted to write a story about a girl who was growing up in the 60s, and then it all just came tumbling down as I was writing the story. All of this, the storyline and the characterization and everything just kind of just fit into place. I hate to say it, but it was the easiest book I've ever written. And they're not all that easy.
So how long did this take you? Like from start to finish, how long do you think?
From the time I started researching until I turned it into my editor, I think probably a year and a half.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Let me ask, is there a theme that you would say runs through this book? Is there something that you really wanted to impart? You know, I guess theme is the word I'll use. Is there something that really runs through this book for you?
I think hope. I think hope really, it's a strong theme in this book that even in the midst of a confusing time, because the 60s were extremely confusing, even in a time of family upheaval and anxiety and loss, we can be people that have hope. That does not take away the sting of suffering, of any of that bad stuff in our lives, but it gives us motivation and the strength to take another step and to keep going. And actually that theme kind of works its way into almost everything I write.
Okay.
Because I'm a person who needs a lot of hope to keep going. And I think particularly now, a lot of us need that. A lot of us need that that reminder that things can get better. And even though it's hard and even though it's uncertain, we can have hope that things are going to even out eventually.
Very nice. So let me ask, running on to that question, would you define your work as inspirational fiction then? I mean, was this something that, some libraries will put their books in the inspirational section. Do you think your book would be there, or do you think it's more universal in theme?
That is a question I've been asking myself for 7 years about everything. Do I fit in the inspirational section at Barnes and Noble, or and that's where I'm placed. all of my books end up in that section. So I think that it's inspirational because of the publishers that I'm with. And, but taking it another step, I hope that it inspires in some way. So I don't know that someone who doesn't go to church, I don't think that they would pick up the book and be like, oh, this isn't for me.
Mhm.
At least that's what I hope. But I also think that someone that does go to church a lot could pick it up and not feel like it wasn't for them too. So I feel like I'm kind of in an in-between spot.
Okay.
And I like it there. I do. I want to reach as many readers as I can.
Sure. Let me ask, what was the hardest experience of writing this book? Like, what was the hardest part of that experience?
I think the hardest part was the emotional toll that it took. I think that I read a lot with a lot of emotion. I'm a very emotional person. But even for months after I was done writing it, I still felt very connected to the characters, and I felt very burdened for what they went through, not because they were my characters, but because I know that their story was very common in the 60s and very common during any wartime. And so I think that was the most difficult part for me.
So obviously it took you a year and a half. It's probably been, what, 2 years since you finally got the final into the publisher. And now here we are in Black Lives Matter and the pandemic. I mean, another tumultuous time. How do you feel this whole pandemic and Black Lives Matter really, I mean, I don't want to sound glib about it, but almost dovetails into your book, because you definitely, I mean, it feels very timely, and I'm not going to try to give away the plot in any way, but
Right.
Black Lives Matter, and then this whole tumultuous period with politics and the pandemic. Do you feel your book dovetailing into that somehow? Like it was timely in that way?
I can't remember exactly who it was that said that history doesn't repeat, but it echoes, or something like that.
I've never heard. That's good.
I can't take credit for that one. I think it was someone much smarter than I.
Okay.
But I think that right now we are seeing a lot of echoes in history. From history, we're seeing a lot of social unrest like we did in the 60s. We're seeing the Black Lives Matter movement, and the movement for equality is much similar to the civil rights movement. A lot of the riots that we're seeing are similar to the race riots that happened in 1967.
Sure.
Another Michigan notable book, Aaron Bartles, We Hope for Better Things, touches more on the Detroit riots of 1967.
We actually have an interview.
I highly recommend that book.
And we actually have an interview with her on Thursday of this week. So
oh, good. Yeah, we're friends. We're good friends. So it was really exciting to see both of our books on there. But we're seeing a lot of similarities. We're seeing a lot of on the brink of massive change. Even with the sexual revolution from the 60s, we're seeing some of that too with some of the discussions about LGBTQ. So we're seeing a lot of echoes. And I guess 2 years ago, I was talking to one of my professors. And I said, it's just a weird time. And he said, there are a lot of weird times in history, and this is one of them, and we will make it through. And I think that's something that we're on the cusp of something. And there is just so much going on, though, right now, that it's hard to see the long-term story of this. But as someone who loves history, I can see that there are waves, there are ebbs and flows in history, and I have a lot of hope that we will overcome, and we just need to be caring for each other. We need to be thinking of other people, not just ourselves, and we need to be leaning in and trying to learn. And this is it's a very important time for us not to say, well, I disagree, so you're wrong. It's a very important time for us to say, tell me more. And I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to learn, and it's not easy, and it's provoking, but it's so important, because if we're going to love our neighbors well, that's what we need to do.
So let me ask, I mean, what's that doing to your writing process right now? I mean, obviously you do a lot of research for your writing. So is it changing the way you research? Is it just changing the way you're writing? Is it changing what you're writing about?
You know, I signed a contract for the book I'm currently writing, a year ago.
Okay.
And so I'm locked in for what I'm writing. And it's the kind of book that I was afraid to write. And I think that this whole current everything is kind of fueling me to want to reach out to readers, so that maybe they'll experience something that's different from what they're used to. So it's not changing what I'm writing, but I think it's changing how I'm writing it. Maybe with a little more empathy, with a lighter hand, because I think right now heavy-handedness is not going to help anybody. And just with a little more compassion for myself, because writing right now is difficult, because our brains are so consumed with so many other things. Right. But I am so grateful for my publisher, my editor, who are very compassionate and very, very understanding of what all is going on. Also, we will be utilizing a sensitivity reader for this book, just to make sure that I don't cause any harm unintentionally. And I think that that's important.
Wow. So that leads me to a question about, I mean, who does the reading through of your books before they're published? Like all manner of things. Who was the first one? Was it your husband? Did you have friends?
My editor.
Your editor.
I hold what I'm writing very close until after my editor reads it. Okay. Because in the early days of me writing novels, I had a lot of people read it before it went to my editor. And, there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and they had good advice, but it wasn't all for that piece, or, it was discouraging or something like that. And so this is where my relationship of trust with my editor is very important. And I'm so grateful for her and for the other. I've worked with several editors along the way, and they're amazing.
So have you had the same publisher and editor all the way through? Is it done the same person? It hasn't.
No, I've been with 3 different publishers over my career. Okay. And I am very happy to say that I have been fortunate in who I've gotten to work with. I have no complaints.
Very nice. So your title, has it always been that, All Manner of Things? Has it always been All Manner of Things? And if not, what's the significance of All Manner of Things? With some publishers, they have a meeting to discuss the title of books. Excuse me. And so I suggest some ideas. Sure. And then they come back and say, well, this is the one we landed on. So sorry. And with this particular novel, I had no clue what it could be. And I turned in all of my ideas. And then about a week later, I was reading a quote by Julian of Norwich, who was a mystic in, forever ago, a very, very, like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Right. And she had visions and different things like that. Very interesting. Her writing is very interesting. And in one of them, she has this quote that is, everybody who has ever heard of her knows this quote. It's, and all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. And when I read that, I thought, that's exactly what this family and this story needs to hear, is that all shall be well. And so I emailed the publisher and I said, can I add one more idea? And it was all manner of things. And they grabbed it and ran with it. And I'm so glad they did, because
because it really it defines the book so well for me.
Are there specific parts or pieces of the book that really are your favorites? Are there characters that are your favorites in this book?
You know, this book has a lot of my all-time favorite characters I've ever written.
Okay.
But if I were to narrow it down, Mike, the big brother of the protagonist, is definitely the kind of character that you want to know. You want to know him.
Sure.
And Gloria, there's a lot of my mom in Gloria,
Okay.
kind of the strong woman who has it all together. And the scene for Gloria that's my favorite, and I'm not going to say too much about it because I want people to experience it,
Sure.
but it involves a meatloaf.
Okay.
And that scene was so fun to write. But I think that of all the characters I've written, all the protagonists I've written over my career, the one I have identified with the most is Annie, who is the protagonist of this book. She's particularly when I was that age, very shy. I was a little more shy then, but I pretended not to be, and just introspective and wants the best for people. And I really identify with her in so many ways.
Very nice. Very nice. So let me ask, you were selected as a Michigan Notable Book Author for this year. What did that mean? How did that feel when you got the word that you were selected?
First of all, I did not believe it. I was like,
Really?
I'm not sure if that's, I don't know. Because it just was such a surprise.
Okay.
And I couldn't speak. And my husband wasn't home from work yet when I got the message. And I turned to my daughter, who had just turned 13 at the time. And I was like, this thing. So I just could not articulate.
I remember sending you that email, by the way.
Well, thank you. I was so, and I just was like, all right, don't freak out when you write back. Try to seem a little normal.
Okay.
But what it means to me, Michigan is so much of who I am. Being a Michigander is, I just love our state so much. It's beautiful and wild and a culture and so varied and vast. And we were just in the UP last week, and I just, amazing.
Right.
But not the black flies. The black flies are wicked. But
yes, they are.
Yeah. So so that being recognized by my home state was just so powerful. And then to be recognized by the library system that got me through childhood and taught me so much was where in Lansing, I'd go and check out as many books as they'd let me, and just having the resources. So two of the things that I've loved so much, joining together and saying your book has merit. I was breathless. It was just such an honor for me.
Well, and I can tell you the committee, yours was a very quick selection. I do remember that, quite frankly. I do remember, and the committee was 13 people made up of people, librarians and writers from around the state, really from Detroit all the way to Zeeland. And it was definitely a quick selection. There was not much debate when it came to your work. So, and we thank you for writing it, and we're glad that your publisher submitted it to the Notable Book Selection Committee.
Well, and I had no idea that. I didn't know. I thank you so much for telling me that. That's very encouraging. And it's just, I told my husband, I don't, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an actress, and I don't know that winning an Oscar would be this cool.
Oh, nice.
Just because it's to me, it was such a huge deal. And then having to keep it a secret for so long was grueling.
Sorry.
But then No, it was great because then it was revealed in a newspaper.
Yes, yes, it was. So let me ask you, I got to ask you a question about this because you're one of the authors and it's always hard. So we always, when we have a normal year, we put authors around the state. And to be frank, and not anything against the UP, but it's hard to get people up to the UP. But I do remember last winter when I asked people, where would you be willing to go? And you definitely were like, yeah, the UP. And then you talked about, I was up in the UP this past weekend. What is it about the UP for you? What do you love about up there so much?
First of all, right now it's the best social distance vacation you can take because there's nobody up there. But when I was a kid, we went up to Copper Harbor a few times, and that's, for anybody that's not familiar, that is as far as you can go.
Yep.
And there's something about the wild nature of the UP, just miles and miles of trees and bears, and it's just so gorgeous.
It's not like you just crossed the bridge either, because I remember specifically you were like, oh no, I'm closer to Wisconsin, and I'm thinking, whoa, that's quite a trip. So I mean, you do that a lot, because I mean that's like another 4 or 5 hours after the bridge, right?
We hadn't since our kids were born. We wanted them to be older so that they could really go on a hike,
Sure.
and really experience that, and because on those UP hikes, you're invested. You're not going, there's no turning back. Like the parking lot's really far away.
No park benches or anything.
We actually, last week we did pictured rocks, and that 10-mile hike felt like 50.
Sure.
But I'll tell you, it is every black fly bite, every fall in the mud, every all of it was worth it to stand on Lake Superior and see the water and the tree growing out of a rock, and just the just enormity of what we have in this state it's startling. I remember when I was a kid and I went to the ocean for this first time, I was like, okay, it was like Lake Michigan. So I mean, it's here in our home state. So when I was selected to speak at a UP library, I was like, oh, that's our vacation. We're going up and we're going to spend time. And we didn't cancel our RSVP because I was just like, let's just do it.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the great things about Michigan. You can drive 8 hours and see something incredible that will blow your mind, that it's in our own state.
Right. Very nice. So finishing up, tell me, why do you think somebody should read your book, All Manner of Things? Why do you think somebody should sit down, invest their time to read your book, All Manner? Obviously, it's a notable book winner, but why do you think personally somebody should read All Manner of Things?
I think that if you sit down and read it, you're going to find a character that either you identify with or that somebody like them. And I think that it will touch people's hearts, and it might help them to grow in empathy for maybe what their parents lived through in the 60s or what people are living through now. And it really is a love letter to Michigan in a lot of ways, especially West Michigan.
Well, Susie, thank you so much. That was a lovely ending right there. So thank you. And to everyone, again, All Manner of Things by Susie Finkbeiner, Revell Press. Again, this is the 2020 Michigan Notable Book Award winner, All Manner of Things. And please check it out at your local library or bookstore. And again, thank you to our friends from the Library of Michigan Foundation. And just remember that we will be having more of these conversations recorded with our 2020 Michigan Notable Book Award winners very shortly. Thank you. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you so much.